Hello everyone and welcome back to 30 Days of Java. It's day 29 now and today we'll be creating our first desktop application project, that is Simon's Game. Now we'll be using Java Swing framework to create this application and learning about it along the way. So let's begin. By the end of this video, you should have a working Simon's Game that you can play, and it also shows you a game over message if you press the wrong button. Here we are in IntelliJ with an empty project with only a main class and a main method. So first, we'll be creating a new class here named Simon Game. Now this class would extend another class named JFrame, which gives us a top level window with a title and a border, and also implement an interface named Action Listener. Now we are getting an error here, so we'll import the Java Swing framework. Now Java Swing framework comes preloaded into the Java JDK, so you don't need to load that using Maven. Once that is done, we'll be defining some properties for this class. The first property would be private list integer, then sequence. Now this property would be a list to store the sequence of button indices. And we are getting an error here, so we'll import the list. After that, we'll also define another list of JButton. We'll call this buttons. Now this list would store the buttons that we can press. Then comes private int current step. Now this integer tracks the current step in the sequence the player is attempting to reproduce. Then private boolean player turn. We'll use this boolean variable to check if it is player's turn or not. Then we'll also need a timer here, private timer, and then private int current flash. Now that we have the properties in place, we'll be creating some methods. First, we'll be creating a constructor here to initialize those values. So I can type in Simon Game. Now inside this constructor, we'll first set the title of the game window. So we can call setTitle method, and we can give it a value of Simon Game by GoldenCat. After that, we can also set the size of this game window by using setSize method, and we'll give it a value of 400 and 400. Once that is done, I'll also need to define set default close operation, and I'll use jframe.exit on close. Now this ensures the application exits when the window is closed. Once that is done, I can set the layout to a grid layout, and I'll give it a grid layout of 2 by 2 because we only have 4 buttons here. Now that we have the GUI in place, we can move on with initializing the sequence. New array list, of buttons. We'll also define them here. Current step would be equal to 0. Player turn would be equal to false. Now we'll create a for loop to initialize the buttons. So we can write for int I equals to 0, I smaller than 4, I plus plus, and then define the buttons here by typing in j button equals to new, then Simon button. Now we'll need to define this button class first. So we'll be creating another class here, Simon button, and this class would extend the j button. Now this class would have a property of int index, and for its constructor is dot index equals to index. Now for these buttons, we'll set the opaque property of these buttons by typing in set opaque to true, and then setting the border painted to false. Next, we'll set the background color to get button color method, which we'll define in just a moment. Once this is done, we'll also define a getter for this index. So we can type in get index, which would simply return the value of this index. Now we'll define the get button color method. Get button color, and we'll simply use a switch case here, which would choose the colors based on the index. So if it is 0, we return color.red. If it is 1, then we return color.blue. If it is 2, then green. If it's 3, then return yellow. And as a default case, we'll simply return color.black. Let me just make it capital. And that's it. We are done with our button class. Now we can go back to our Simon game here, and we are not getting the error anymore. Now after this, we'll add an action listener to this button. This. And then we'll add this button into the buttons list. Now this add method adds the button to the window. Now once we are done with this, we are gonna go ahead and call a method new round, which we'll just define in a moment. And we'll set the visibility to true. Now we'll define this new round method, private void new round, and we'll use a random value first. Now we only want random values to be between 0 to 3. So we can set this sequence dot add and then random dot next int to 4. Now this would add a random number from 0 to 3 to the sequence. Then we'll set the current step to 0 and player turn to false, because right now it's the computer that's playing the game. Once that is done, we'll call another method, play sequence. Now this method will define now, so it would be another private void method, play sequence, and inside this method we'll use the timer that we created for this class. We'll call the timer class and we'll give it a delay of 1000 milliseconds, that is 1 second. Now for the event, we'll create new action listener, and then inside this I'll create if current flash smaller than sequence.size, then button dot get sequence dot get current flash dot set background color dot white. Now in line number 55, we are only setting the button in the sequence to white, that is to flash. Once this is done, we can create another timer here that would define the pause, and we'll give it a delay of 500 milliseconds, that's half a second. This would also have an action listener. Now for this, I can call buttons.get sequence.get current flash, then set background, to get button color sequence dot get current flash. Now we haven't defined the get button color yet, so we'll define that after this function. Now after this, we can increment the value current flash by 1, and now this timer pause action listener might look a little bit intimidating, but it's only giving a brief pause after each flash. Once that is done, we can set this pause to repeat to false, and then pause.start. Once this done, we'll also define an else condition here that stops the timer and player turn would be true. That is, the player can now duplicate the sequence shown to him. So we'll close this and then set the current flash to 0, timer.set repeat to true, timer.start. Now the reason that we are setting this set repeat and start here is that we are ensuring that the sequence timer repeats and starts the sequence timer again. Now that it's done, we'll define the get button color method. So we can type in private color get button color, and we'll define a simple switch case. So we can use the method that we have defined here. And this method only returns the color mapping with an index. Once this done, we'll define another method here, public void action performed, which would take in action event as its parameter. This method will be overriding from the interface that we implemented for this class, that is action listener. Now this method would handle the button click events that the user would do. So we'll first define if it is not the player's turn, then simply return. But if it is, then we'll create Simon buttons here. And from the event, we'll check which button was pressed. Now before we move any further, I would like to explain about the events. So an event can be anything. It can be you clicking a button or a keystroke. It can also be you hovering your mouse over a button. So there are various events present that you can leverage and use. Here we are using the click event and checking which button was pressed. So after this, I can type in if button.getIndex equal to sequence dot get current step, then we'll increment the current step by 1 and current step would be equal to sequence dot size, then player turn would become false and new round would be called. Now in this if condition, we are checking if the button that was pressed by the user is correct or not. If it is correct, then we'll increment the value of current step as defined in line number 92. Now once the current step value becomes equal to the size of the sequence, then the player would have won that round. So we are setting the player turn to false and initiating a new round. Now after this, we'll also define an else block here. That is, if the user clicked on the wrong button, then we'll use J option pane and show a dialog box to the user saying this, then game over. And then we can also give the score as sequence.size -1. Once this done, we can clear the sequence and then restart the game. And that's it. That's all the logic that we had to write for the Simon game. Now we can go back to our main method and from here call the Simon game by typing in swing utilities dot invoke later new runnable and then new Simon game. Now if I run this program, we are getting back an error that says exception in thread AWT event Q0 index 3 out of bound for length 0. Since this is an index related issue, it should be related to something that we did wrong while creating the for loop, maybe. Int I equals to 0. Yep, it should be smaller than 4. Otherwise, it won't run for a single instance. Now, if I run this program again, yep, it works fine. And now we can play this game. Now it works fine until we keep on playing. Let's now choose a wrong option here. So we can choose like this, and we get a game over message also. So this how you can create a Simon's game using simple core Java. Now you can expand this project to also show the level numbers, and also if I maximize this window, you can see it doesn't look that good. You can format that as well. Also, you can use the CRUD operations with the DB to keep the high score for the game. As always, we'll end this video with a quote that says, "The greatest obstacle to living is expectancy, which hangs upon tomorrow and loses today." Thank you for watching and have a great day.